You're listening to the Uncensored Direct Marketing Show. This show is designed for direct response marketers who want raw, unfiltered conversion tips and secrets to scale their offers profitably to reach their next million. I'm Maria Sparagus. I'm the founder of DirectPayNet and your host. Now let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of Uncensored Direct Marketing. Today's guest is the Executive Editor of CoinDesk magazine, Marc Hochstein. On this episode, I talked to Marc about how he got his start in crypto in 2011, as well as how crypto has evolved since he started writing about it for American Banker magazine. We also take a dive into stablecoins, DeFi projects, and how the corporate world is influencing crypto development and value. I hope you enjoy this episode. It's full of insight based on Marc's 10-year crypto journey. I wanted also to let you know that we had a few minor audio problems along the way, but my editor did a great job to give you the best listening experience possible. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss a moment. And thanks for listening. Everybody, welcome to our next episode of Uncensored Direct Marketing. Today, I have a very special guest talking about Bitcoin and a Bitcoin series. We have the editor, or actually, Marc, you said you're the executive editor.
Executive editor, yes.
Executive editor of CoinDesk. Marc and I have a past. I guess we've known each other for quite some time. I would say probably 7 or 8 years. And we were very early adopters in the Bitcoin and blockchain space. We met, I think it was probably around 2013, 2014, doing a couple of conferences for just talking about crypto and just kind of geeking out on everything blockchain. So I thought it would be very interesting to have you, Marc, on the show so we can kind of talk about what happened since then, where you see things going, and obviously your time at CoinDesk and your experience. So please give us a short intro of what you're doing now and how you got to get into the space, the crypto space.
Thank you, Maria. I'm really honored to be invited onto the show. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I've been a financial journalist pretty much my whole career. I spent most of my career at American Banker. American Banker is one of the oldest publications in the U.S. It's a trade publication for people in the commercial banking industry. Had a pretty good career there. Worked there for 17 years, which is sort of unheard of in media these days to work at the same place so long. But it was, I learned a lot there. But in about 2011, 2012, I became interested in Bitcoin. I think the way I originally learned about it was through an article in the New Yorker that came out, one of the earliest ones in the mainstream media, and I just was fascinated. I thought I got to learn everything about this. This is incredible. So I started going to meetups, Bitcoin meetups, community meetups in New York City, and I would, I interacted with people on Twitter who were part of that early Bitcoin adopter community. So I was writing about it in a serious way pretty early on, when most people in mainstream media or legacy media were not taking this stuff seriously. So in 2017, I had the opportunity to join CoinDesk, and it was a difficult decision to go from a very stable publication that had been around, almost 180 years to a brand new startup that had been around for just, at the time, I think 4 years. But I'm just so fascinated with this space that I leapt at the opportunity. So I've been here, and the last 3 years in crypto have felt like 17 years. So it's definitely very different.
So the question is, when you started looking into crypto and you started getting into it, what was the price?
I think Bitcoin was at $10 at the time when
$10. So were you the famous pizza boy that bought that payment to the 10,000 Bitcoin?
I did make other Bitcoin transactions that I now regret. I do have a hat somewhere that I paid for with Bitcoin that, if I just kept the Bitcoin, I could probably pay off the mortgage today. But, and actually, we'll get into this in a bit, but that's, one of the interesting things is that early on, in those days when we met, the narrative in the early Bitcoin community, a lot of it was around payments. And a lot of it was around, at the time, Bitcoin was being pitched in part as a more efficient payment system. That narrative is broken down for a number of reasons that we'll get into. But one of them is the fact that even though it's a very volatile asset day to day, it's very famous for the wild price swings when you look at the exchange rate with the dollar. Over time, as we've alluded to, Bitcoin, the price has steadily gone up. I mean, it's, again, from day to day, it swings wildly.
For sure.
But over a long time horizon, the trajectory has generally been upward. And so one of the reasons why, at least for now, I would say it's not a very practical means of exchange for everyday purchases, is that Bitcoin incentivizes you to defer gratification and to spend and to if you want to use a judgmental word, to hoard, or the industry logo is hodl, which is a misspelling of hold. But the nature of a deflationary currency is that you are, for better or for worse, you are incentivized to save and to and not to buy that cup of coffee or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I completely agree with you. And I think that's how we connected initially. I think it was, when you were talking about it as a payment mechanism, I remember a conversation that we had in 2013. It was the first show that I've done that I did. I was a speaker at Inside Bitcoin in New York City. And I think that's where we had connected. It's coming back to me. And I remember standing up in the room and I had no idea what I was doing, to be honest. It was just, I was invited there. I was like, ooh, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but like, whatever, sure. I know about high risk payments pretty well, but Bitcoin's kind of new. And I'd been in the space for maybe about a year before. All of a sudden, everybody was calling me an expert. I was like, I don't know what anybody's talking about. I just read about this stuff. But I remember standing up in the room and I said, Bitcoin is not practical for payments. And everybody was like in shock, like that I was at this Bitcoin show.
Must have been heretical at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I had, Shakir Khan, I think from Spotify. He like literally came up to me. He's like, Maria, that was like a revolutionary talk. And I was like, no, but it's serious. Like, who the hell is thinking this is going to be used for payments? Like, this is so like not scalable on a payments. I said, do you know how many transactions Visa and Mastercard does in like a second? How's the blockchain like right now going to be able to handle any of that? How are the fees going to be taken care of? Like, this is not practical. I said, this is a store of value. And it was like such a refreshing point of view back then. Now everybody's saying the same thing. It's a store of value. But back then in 2013, when we were at that show, I felt like it was just like a whole bunch of people that just wanted this to be the next Visa, Mastercard, or the next payment system. But, intrinsically, the technology is just not there. And secondly, we both know about push versus pull systems, and we need credit. People need credit. This is not a credit system. It's not going to work. So very, very interesting how, it evolved and eventually people got the point that it's a store of value. But talking about payments just in themselves, because I know that's like a big area of expertise for you, is, Mastercard just made an announcement that they're going to offer crypto, they're going to accept crypto or Bitcoin, I think specifically, they're going to accept Bitcoin, and they're going to also settle in Bitcoin, which is huge. Because before, there was a lot of, even with like BitPay and some of the earlier companies, it was like, well, take your crypto, convert it to USD. So now it's going crypto, Bitcoin specifically. What are your thoughts on, why Mastercard is doing this? Or, just off the cuff, like, why would they be doing this, and where is that leading us to?
I was pretty, I wasn't shocked, but I was fairly surprised by the Mastercard announcement. I don't have a great insight into that one. But every day there's like a new sort of mainstream financial player that kind of comes out of the woodwork and says that they're going to get involved, and all of this was just, back in those days, was just unimaginable. I think I think everyday payments on any kind of a blockchain based system, particularly Bitcoin, it's still tough, for the reasons that you alluded to. Back in those days, to be fair to the people who were speaking of Bitcoin as a payments method back in those days, the fees at the time were like almost non-existent. And it was like it was just like pennies, if that. This over time, as we go into the big run up in the Bitcoin price in 2017, there was this new sort of strain on the network, and that pushed up the transaction fee that you had to pay to get your Bitcoin transactions included in the block. It was just sort of laying bare the scaling limitations that maybe you had foreseen at the time, but a lot of people did not. I think the fee pressure, I think, has come down a bit for a bunch of various reasons, but most of the people who are sort of still in the Bitcoin community would probably argue that it's not for your cup of coffee, it's not for your everyday purchase. There's a couple other things to keep in mind about, though. I mean, there are other competing blockchains, and a lot of them. There have been a couple sort of splinter currencies that have broken off from Bitcoin, and those those communities, that's where the real hardcore payments people went. So you have Bitcoin Cash, which was forked off or seceded, if you will, from the main Bitcoin network in 2017. You also have Bitcoin SV, which is a fork of Bitcoin Cash. And both of those networks and both of those communities are very much more interested in trying to make their version of Bitcoin a high volume, low fee, everyday payments type of network. Neither of them has the same level of security as Bitcoin. Neither of them has the same level of network effect as Bitcoin. Neither of them is as valuable as Bitcoin. So it kind of remains to be seen, how much scaling and how much of that kind of high throughput you can do on chain. So the other thing to take note of, though, is that even though on the main Bitcoin chain, I think most users now are going to reserve the blockchain for final settlement for sort of large transactions where it's worth it to pay the cost. You have the second layer solutions. So one of the most sort of interesting things going on in Bitcoin right now is this thing called the Lightning Network, which is they call it the layer 2. And I will try to do justice with this description, but basically it's like it's conducting these sort of high volume, low value payments off chain in such a way that let's say I want to buy a cup of coffee from you. So Marc and Maria on the Lightning Network will open up what they call a payment channel, which is this sort of bi-directional channel where you and I can send Bitcoin back and forth between each other for these small value payments. And then when one of us wants to settle up, we go back to the blockchain for final settlement. And so, the final balance between the two of us is recorded on the blockchain. But let's say there's a third party that I want to buy a cup of coffee from. That third party doesn't know me, but that third party knows you. I can connect to that third party through you. So you have a channel with that third party. I have a channel with you. And so the Lightning Network can route the payment from me to you and so forth. So you can have all the, you have this like sort of, so imagine this sort of spider web pattern on the Lightning Network, where you have people who have like some level of trust in each other, sending payments back and forth. But again, when you want to cash out, you can take your Lightning balance to the main blockchain and withdraw, quote unquote, there.
So it's kind of like, if I understand correctly, it's kind of like social proof. Like, because I've bought from you and you trust me, merchant B can trust me based on the fact that you have a relationship. Is that basically what?
Yeah, that we have a channel. Yes.
Okay.
I think that's the general concept. I'm sure I'm mangling it, but the basic idea is that because you don't have to like get these things, recorded in the blockchain, and you don't have to apply the proof of work, and you don't have to get everyone under the sun to agree on the state of the entire ledger. You and I can do these payments really quickly.
Okay.
And then it's only when we're settling up that everything gets settled on the blockchain. So the Lightning Network, it's hard to tell how much. I mean, there's been a lot of like sort of R&D work, a lot of development work on the Lightning Network. One of the more interesting startups these days is a company called Zap, that's run by a young man named Jack Mollers, and he has a service called Strike, which, if I understand it correctly, is sort of using the Lightning Network rails to move fiat around. So, like, it sort of harkens back to like some of the earliest models you saw in Bitcoin, where if I have dollars and you want to get paid in euros, the Bitcoin, but this time through the Lightning Network serves as that bridge to move the money in and out of. And Zap has, I believe, they're in the incubation program that Visa has, so they have ties to Visa.
Oh, wow.
So in that sense, like you are seeing like a rebirth of the payments concept in Bitcoin, but the twist here is that it's going on off chain.
Okay. So kind of like private blockchains?
Well, the Lightning Network is not a private blockchain. Is sort of like this concept that is kind of fallen by the wayside a bit. So a private blockchain was the sort of the fashionable thing in about 2015 and 2016, where a lot of the banks decided that they were going to experiment with blockchain technology, but they didn't want to dirty their hands with the the wild west of Bitcoin and these uncontrollable open networks. So they decided we're going to create private blockchains that where instead of where not everyone can participate. The thing about Bitcoin is that anyone can download the software, right? If you want a basic wallet, you can just download it onto your computer. All you need is an internet connection. There's no KYC, know your customer. There's no ID required. It doesn't matter if you're Joe Biden or the milkman, right? Like anyone can do it, and anyone can run a node. And theoretically, mining is open to anyone, although it's a very expensive business, so you need a lot of gear. But there's no like sort of identity-based barriers to entry. So that was anathema to the banks because banking is a highly regulated industry, and the laws and the regulations in developed countries require financial institutions to know who they're dealing with. So they created these sort of like private networks that copied certain characteristics of the Bitcoin blockchain, and it was all sort of couched as experiments. And a lot of that has sort of quieted down. I mean, you still see. I mean, JP Morgan, I think, is still sort of doing some interesting work. They had their JPM coin, which was sort of like this internal currency they use for settling transactions among their own clients. But a lot of the enterprise blockchain stuff is just not really. I think it's fair to say has not lived up to the hype. IBM, which had huge ambitions for this sector, they've really retrenched and made a lot of cutbacks in the blockchain space. So private blockchain has sort of become this sort of dated concept. I mean, I think there's still people working on it behind the scenes, but no one's really getting excited about that. I wouldn't call the Lightning Network a private blockchain necessarily, because again, it's an open network. Anyone can set up I mean, you need technical skills to set up a Lightning node, but there's no, at least as things stand, the Lightning Network, the one thing it does have in common with Bitcoin is that it is an open network. It's permissionless. So I would say it would be a misnomer to call that a private blockchain. It's not even a blockchain really. It's just this sort of it's a peer-to-peer network that's on top of Bitcoin, and that occasionally sort of syncs up with the Bitcoin network, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And the interesting thing I want to touch upon is, peer-to-peer payments. I feel like in the peer-to-peer payment space where I mean, there's so much development there and there's so many things going on, wallets and all this different stuff. And it seems it's pretty easy for people to transact amongst each other, especially in developed countries. If I want to send you money, you want to, Venmo and PayPal and all this stuff, it's all there. The interesting thing I think is, and you touched upon it earlier, like larger transactions, B2B transactions. If I want to send somebody money as a business to another business owner, like a large sum of money, that's where things kind of break down, I think, in the financial system. You got wires. You're not going to send somebody a PayPal for 25, 30, 40,000. It's going to be insane in terms of fees and so forth. That doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, talking about Bitcoin as, or crypto in general as a payment method, do you foresee a future, within the next 5 years where companies are transacting each other instead of sending each other wires, they're sending each other Bitcoin, or they're sending ETH or whatever, one of the main currencies?
Maybe. I mean, it's conceivable. I mean, it's still very early right now. I mean, remember that, like, Bitcoin is still volatile on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So you have to take that into consideration. I mean, we do, I mean, I'd say it's more plausible now than I would have said a couple of months ago, simply because, one of the big stories of 2020 was this company MicroStrategy, which is just a B2B software company that, they've been around, 20 plus years. They date back to the old dot-com bubble, but they have sort of, their CEO was a guy named Michael Saylor, who seems to be a late convert to Bitcoin, but a very passionate one. Michael Saylor is the CEO of MicroStrategy, and he, at least his official story is that he's concerned about inflation whittling away the value of all the cash that this company has on hand. So he's been buying Bitcoin pretty aggressively, even like issuing debt with which to buy Bitcoin. And his company's almost become as much, if not more, a Bitcoin play as it is an enterprise software play. And he loves to talk about it. He said that he spends something like 40% of his time now thinking about Bitcoin related stuff. And that was that's still sort of an outlier, right? But, Square, Jack Dorsey's payment company, they've put a portion of their treasury in Bitcoin. I think MicroStrategy made it kind of, safe for them in a way to do that. More recently, Tesla has been buying Bitcoin for its own coffers, and Elon Musk, obviously, is this sort of charismatic, celebrity. So that was, and these, significant amounts of money, in the billions of dollars here. So I think it is conceivable, if this trend continues, that they might, if they are going to be holding money in Bitcoin, and not just as like a speculative investment, but as like, this sort of inflation resistant treasury, then I'd say it's conceivable. Because again, it's one thing, a cup of coffee with Bitcoin is impracticable for many reasons. But if Tesla's going to pay their suppliers for shipment of tires or shipment of batteries or whatever, it's not the craziest idea right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and talking about the enterprise money that's entering, and people, all the big companies. It feels like, I remember also back in the earlier days. I feel like we're dinosaurs in the space almost now, even though it's only been around for less than 10 years. It was fashionable to say. I think at one point it was like, I can't remember if it was Overstock or one of these like e-com companies. They were like, hey, we're going to start accept. Everybody was like just trying to get the press off saying, hey, we're going to accept Bitcoin. But then they made like no sales in Bitcoin. Yeah. So it was kind of like, oh yeah, we're accepting Bitcoin now, but yeah, nobody's using it. So whatever. So it's interesting. I'm very interested to see. And obviously I'm going to follow CoinDesk to see the news. And I'm curious to know how that's going to progress as stability, starts I guess Bitcoin starts becoming more stable. But talking about your point specifically about, these, Mark Saylor and all these people kind of going into crypto, do you think it's their trust in crypto, or is it their distrust in the US dollar that's pushing them there?
That's a great question. Well, I mean, definitely, if you talk to Saylor, I mean, he definitely has sort of a doom and gloom view of the dollar. It's trust in trust in crypto. I mean, with Bitcoin, it's specifically trust in the network rules. There's this sort of hard cap that there will only ever be about 21 million Bitcoin. After that, there will be no more that are minted, and changing those network rules would be very, very difficult. I suppose theoretically it's not impossible, but it would be very difficult to take over the network and force to a change like that. And everyone's incentivized not to do that because that would wreck the value of the asset. And part of the value of the asset is that it is by design scarce. So I think the scarcity is part of the allure. I do think that some people are, particularly in the last year or so, because when COVID hit and governments, U.S. and elsewhere, and central banks started taking extraordinary measures to prop up the economy, both through fiscal stimulus and monetary expansion. That sort of got people worried about inflation again. Economists will debate how serious how serious that concern is, but definitely the people who the institutional players that are looking at Bitcoin now, I mean, they see this as digital gold. In the past they would have looked to gold as this sort of port in a storm from this hedge against inflation, and now they're and they look, but even gold, you never know when someone's going to dig it up somewhere. So, while the supply of gold is scarce, it's not limited in this really defined way, the way it is for Bitcoin. So I think that's why you see people like Paul Tudor Jones, people like, Mass Mutual, even like this, conservative insurance company, mutually owned insurance company is investing in Bitcoin. All these names, and these are just the names we know about. There are, occasionally you hear whispers, and so there's, there could be more to come out of the woodwork, who have been kind of investing in these, quietly. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's a leap of faith involved, obviously, but again, I think I think it's a little bit of each. I think it's that they're sort of getting comfortable with the idea of this currency that no one really controls, and everyone's just sort of buying into the idea, and they're getting increasingly less comfortable with the government currencies.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's all part of the world globalization, without getting super philosophical about it. But being able to trade amongst different countries and people transacting a lot more, the gig economy, all that, it's just making it a lot more difficult to say the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency. It almost feels like maybe BTC is trying to vie for that position of reserve currency of the world versus one specific country. So there might be like a power shift. I see this, all the wealth coming into BTC and just crypto in general being almost like every generation has a wealth shift. You know what I mean? There's always like a wealth can't stay static. There's always shifting of wealth different places. And I feel like it's this generation's almost opportunity to shift wealth their way. So it remains to be seen. But talking about, financial systems and the government and crypto, obviously now crypto is starting to get a little bit more stable. What are your thoughts in general on stable coins? Just people who are trying to take the volatility of crypto and make it stable.
Okay, so stable coins right now, for those unfamiliar, a stable coin refers to a cryptocurrency that is designed to hold its price against either the U.S. dollar or some other fiat currency. So it's designed to be price stable, and the way that this is accomplished is basically you have this token, you have this asset that runs on a blockchain, like say Ethereum, but it is backed by collateral. And sometimes that collateral is on-chain. That's the case with DAI, which is a stable coin that runs on top of Ethereum. But in most cases, it's just dollars in a real world bank. So the most, the two biggest stable coins, there's Tether, also known as USDT. And the way Tether works is you can, if you go to Tether, the company, with, let's just say like $100,000, and you can say, I'd like to buy 100,000 USDT. You give them $100,000. They give you 100,000 USDT in your wallet. They actually run on several different blockchains, and then you can go zap your USDT wherever you want. So, and then, and likewise, if you receive USDT and you want to cash out into real world money, you can go back to Tether and say, I'd like to redeem this. And at least in theory, if they are as well reserved as they have maintained they are, then you should be able to get $100,000 back. So it's collateralized. The main use case for stablecoins right now is basically for crypto trading. It is a way for traders to take advantage of arbitrage opportunities at the different crypto exchanges around the world by moving money real fast between one and the other. So if you can make money by selling Bitcoin in Singapore and buying it in the U.S., you can you would use USDT or another stablecoin to move very quickly, because I think as you alluded to, bank wires aren't necessarily that fast. ACH isn't that fast.
Yeah.
The risks of stablecoins, I mean, the biggest one is, you are reintroducing counterparty risk into a ecosystem that didn't have it previously. You have to, you ultimately have to trust Tether that they are in fact holding one for one a dollar for every USDT that they have issued. And that is actually a long-standing point of controversy, simply because of there's not a whole lot of transparency about USDT. They have provided snapshots of their reserves. In fact, this is at the center of this investigation that the New York Attorney General's office has been conducting for the last couple of years.
Wow.
And that's a big point of controversy too. I don't believe this theory, but there is a long-running, almost a conspiracy theory that Tether has been printing more USDT than it actually has dollars in the bank, and that they do this to drive up the price of Bitcoin. I don't believe that that's plausible anymore, particularly not in this bull market. It may have been more plausible in 2017. However, without more transparency about Tether's reserves, you can't write it off completely. So it's just sort of like, until that case is resolved, that's just going to be a cloud that kind of just hangs over the Bitcoin market. That said, Tether pretty consistently trades at $1 per Tether. The reason is, as I alluded to, no one parks their money in Tether for a long time, right? You use Tether is it's a bridge. It's not a goal, right? So people use Tether to move money from one place to another real quick, but they don't leave it there. So even if you have some doubt about the backing of Tether, not everyone's going to just try to redeem it directly from Tether. They're going to use USDT as sort of a rails to move from one crypto exchange to another, and then they'll exchange crypto at one of the exchanges. So Tether is the predominant stablecoin in the market, but there are other alternatives. USDC is probably the biggest one that's issued by a company called Circle. USDC is probably, I'd say it's fair to say, more heavily regulated. Their balances are kept in a U.S. bank, at least one U.S. bank that has FDIC insurance. I'd say the the compliance is probably more stringent with USDC, but it doesn't quite have the volume yet that Tether does. Tether is just still the sort of dominant animal. So despite everything I said a few minutes ago about these lingering doubts about Tether, it seems that just the market doesn't care. Because no one's using it as a destination. It's a bridge, and as a bridge, it's good enough.
Okay, well, that gives me some memories of Mt. Gox. I think you remember the one and only exchange that was like pretty much where everybody got their Bitcoin probably 5-6 years ago or so, and it seems like Tether is now in that position where people are finding that that's what they're using for stability. To me, I'm a banker at heart, I guess. Like, just banking side always gets me more curious, and I feel like what kind of KYC is being done, if they're holding your money, like what kind of regulation is there. It just my brain. It's hard for my brain not to go there just because of my past and my history. But I feel like is there legitimate KYC? Like if I take 10 Bitcoin, convert it into Tether, like is anybody figuring out where this money came from and why they're holding it and who sent it there and stuff like that? So I feel like for payment rails or for trading money, it could be good, but I agree with you on the long storage there. It might not be the most secure place, but at the end of the day, I find that stable coins, I don't know if you agree with this, but stable coins and Bitcoin and blockchain, or Bitcoin specifically, are almost counter each other, right? Because the whole point is one is decentralized and is the market basically is dictating its value and so forth. And then you're trying to stabilize it with a stable coin. It kind of almost doesn't make sense to me that that these two would work in tandem. But a lot of people, especially people who are speculating on BTC, are finding like, oh my God, it's at this new high. I bought it at 5,000-10,000. Now it's 50, 60, 70,000, whatever it's going to get to. Like, we gotta secure that. But then at the end of the day, if another 2017 happens where it drops all of a sudden and everybody starts cashing out like all at the same time, how liquid is this company? How quickly are you going to get your money? Do you foresee problems with that, basically?
Well, yeah. I mean, the risk is a classic run on the bank. That's the thing with the stable coin, is that you're sort of bringing back these risks that have been with us for centuries, right? A stable coin, you could argue, is it's kind of like a bank. I mean, you are in some ways it reminds one of the and this might be a rather cruel analogy, but if you think about the wildcat banks of the 19th century, you would they weren't before FDIC insurance, you're trusting this party to hold your money, I don't know, maybe that's not the best analogy. I mean, but a stable coin is, it's almost analogous to an unregulated money market fund, kind of. No.
Yeah.
That's in a way, say. Right? In other words, they're holding cash for you, and it's supposed to be liquid. But if too many people come at once, I mean, they all, remember the official line is they all say they're back one for one. So it should not be a problem. And remember, they're holding it in cash and cash equivalents. So it should not be a problem. It should be more like a narrow bank, right? That's the sort of new concept we have of, it's not an FDIC insured bank, but they're just holding it in cash or T-bills. So it shouldn't be, but I suppose it'll be put to the test sooner or later. So
yeah, for sure.
We shall see, as they say.
Well, I mean, talking about the stable coins, and I don't want to dig too far deep into this because we've hammered this topic, but what do you think of DeFi? First, okay. Can you explain it briefly and just give me some information, your thoughts? I'm just kind of digging into your brain and getting all your feedback on all the hot topics.
Yeah, DeFi is really interesting and very weird and very complicated. But probably the simplest way to think about DeFi is everything you can do with a bank, except instead of doing it with a bank, you're doing it with a robot on the internet. So lending, depositing money as if it were in a CD, borrowing money. It's sort of doing this, but your counterparty, instead of an institution or another person, your counterparty is a smart contract that lives on the blockchain. So that's the basic idea. If you talk to DeFi people, they will give you these sort of very lofty rhetoric about how they're going to bank the underbanked, and perhaps in the long term that might be a thing. I'd say right now the main use case for DeFi is speculation by crypto savvy people. To some degree, there might be hedging by crypto traders using DeFi. But again, it's another one of the, like stablecoins, it's another one of these use cases that is sort of, endemic to the crypto universe. It's not really being used a whole lot outside the crypto world. That maybe that'll change, but I don't see that happening very anytime soon, just because it is so complicated and so weird right now, and it is so difficult to wrap your head around the way these things work that I can't envision mass adoption. I could be wrong, but that's that's sort of the state of affairs right now. But DeFi is interesting, and my colleague Brady Dale, who's sort of our one of our DeFi gurus, what he would tell you is the only way to really understand it is to use it. Now, I will add a caveat here, is that he's not saying, and this goes for all crypto, by the way. First of all, I think it's anyone, if this is the first time you're ever listening to any podcast, or you're just learning about Bitcoin, crypto, any of it, don't put in more than you can afford to lose. That needs to be said every time, right? I'd say even Bitcoin with its track record is not something you bet the whole farm on. And
for sure.
and that would go double for anything other than Bitcoin. So be very careful. Do your own research. Don't trust anyone. Don't trust me. Don't trust Maria. You're all. This is the Wild West. So that said, the way to learn about these things, and I'd say particularly in DeFi, would be to just play around with it with small amounts of money. So stake a little bit of crypto in the compound protocol. Play around with these things, because it's like if you've read Plato's Republic, there's that whole parable of the cave, and there's these this idea of these men who live their whole life in a cave, and their only conception of the world is the drawings on the wall of the cave. But they don't know what actually the outside world is really like. And so DeFi in particular is very hard to explain and describe until you've actually gotten your hands dirty with it. Again, it is not a place to gamble away your life savings. You can people don't realize, I think, even with Bitcoin, that you can buy a fraction of a Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin is around 50 grand right now, but you don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. Bitcoin is divisible to the 8th decimal. So if you just want to play around with this stuff, you could probably acquire as little as $10 worth of Bitcoin. And you can mess around with small amounts with DeFi as well. So that's probably the best way to learn about it. But it is this sort of like very weird and interesting frontier of fintech.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, just like 25, 30 years ago, email was like, what the hell? I have to send this, and how does this work? I think we're just at the cusp of everything, and it's going to become a part of daily life. Everything that has to do with Bitcoin and crypto and blockchain and so forth. It's just we're really at the beginning, and we're just getting there. But DeFi is just it's decentralized finance, right? That's what DeFi stands for. Decentralized finance is it's a concept that I've been kind of looking into, just because I'm curious and I'm interested in the space, but I still myself have not been able to really back a project or not back a project. I just don't know about it. But that's it's a very interesting thought that you had, is just maybe let's say take $100 or something and just try and see what happens with it, and something that, at this point it's a little bit like gambling, because if you lose it, you just have to be ready to lose it. And if you win, then great, but you can't get addicted to the high of winning every time, because you might lose. So that's an interesting point for all our listeners, and thank you for that, Marc. So just in closing and just summarizing our talk, and a couple of final thoughts on your end, what are your, what do you anticipate in the next 5 years? Do you anticipate mass adoption, like everybody's going to have crypto? Do you anticipate, I mean, this is, nobody's holding you to this. This is just, you've been in the space for so long. I would just be interested in your take on, like, what's the next 5 years? It's hard to imagine 10. So let's say 5 years going to be like in the crypto space.
So one other thing I'll just mention about DeFi before we get to that.
Yeah.
If you are going to put money into DeFi, the heuristic that people have recommended to me is, number one, make sure that a DeFi project has security audits, because these DeFi protocols get hacked quite a bit. That's it's a smart contract is basically software. It's a computer program, and sometimes they're not very well tested. So security audits are sort of like one of the things you should look for. The big thing is, how big a community does this DeFi project have? Because a lot of crypto, and this is true of Bitcoin, this is true of most of the blockchains, and it's true of DeFi, is about network effect, and it's about community. And the ones that last longer are the ones that have these sort of resilient communities around them, and it's almost a sort of self-fulfilling thing. Like, if you, for those who are familiar with Nassim Taleb, the writer, he wrote The Black Swan, he wrote Anti-Fragile. He has this concept of Lindy, and Lindy is just the idea that the longer something's been around, the longer it will stick around. It's just this sort of like self-fulfilling thing. So, so like Lindy effect is something to think about, and network effect, and community. And are there prominent people in crypto that are involved in a DeFi project, because that's just going to draw interest in it. So that's the thing with DeFi. As far as the next 5 years goes, it's really hard to tell. I mean, again, like when I joined CoinDesk 3 years ago, I would not have predicted at the time that by now you'd have Mass Mutual, putting its, policyholders' money into Bitcoin. I would not have predicted. I might have, Tesla wouldn't have surprised me so much, because Elon Musk is kind of a madman. But I wouldn't have predicted all the interest that we're seeing from Wall Street. I wouldn't have predicted all the interest we're seeing from banks. I mean, banks are looking to become crypto custodians and hold private keys for crypto investors, which and you've got the OCC explicitly blessing us as a line of business, which would have been unthinkable to me. So it's really hard to tell. I mean, I think like the one thing that I think is really important, and this would be one more caveat to what I said earlier about payments. So again, like, it's very rare to have someone, use Bitcoin to like, buy anything at Walmart, or, just to like, I'm going to pay you back $5 for lunch. I'm going to use Bitcoin for that. It's just, there's just every reason not to use particularly on-chain for that. But there is a very important category where I think even payments is a viable use case. And that is people or transactions where there's nowhere else to turn. That is, categories of transactions that are pariahs. And yes, that does include illegal transactions, obviously. I mean, one of the most notorious use cases for crypto and Bitcoin in particular was the Silk Road and these darknet drug markets. Yeah. But that also means activities that are not necessarily illegal, but are increasingly being deplatformed. So, and that spans the spectrum. On the one hand, people in the adult industry, that is a place where crypto is seeing some adoption. I mean, Pornhub has been deplatformed by Visa and Mastercard. I don't know if they rectified that, but as of last year, the only way you could pay for your premium, the premium service that they offer was through cryptocurrency, because cryptocurrency is not centralized. There's no, risk committee that's saying, oh, this is bad for our reputation if we're associated with this. Like it's something that it's a network that no one controls, and so it doesn't matter what you write in the New York Times about a particular use case. Bitcoin is indifferent. Bitcoin is neutral, but at the same time, voices on the political right that have been deplatformed by major corporations, and some of these are, some pretty extreme organizations that, I would, that I would not endorse, but I do, it is noteworthy that, when they get dumped by GoFundMe and they can't raise funds from GoFundMe, or when they get dumped by their bank, or when they get deplatformed by PayPal, they are still able to use Bitcoin. And I think that is, the term for this is censorship resistance. It is allowing, A and B to transact no matter what C says. And that's important. And I think that is actually one of, aside from that, the concept of sound money, you set aside the inflation stuff, set aside the monetary policy stuff, set aside, any questions of like fees or speed or any of that. Just, something that we take for granted, having grown up in a world with cash, is that, any two people, no matter, would have some way to pay each other. So, if a teenager in New York City goes into a bodega and they want to buy some cigarettes, they shouldn't be buying cigarettes, but they probably could find a place where they have cash and they could buy cigarettes. Not saying that's right, not saying that's wrong, but that is the world that we are used to. But sometimes it's not going to be cigarettes. Sometimes it's going to be making a donation to your church. Sometimes it's going to be buying a magazine that someone doesn't approve of. But we are accustomed to a world where, like, let's say you go into a butcher shop, you say, I want to buy steak. You hand whatever it costs, $20 to the butcher. He gives you a steak. It's fine. If physical cash goes away, it's conceivable that all transactions are subject to veto by a middleman, and a middleman can be politicized. I'm not saying intermediaries don't serve a purpose. They create value. That's why they exist. But intermediaries can be bullied around, not just by governments, not just by regulators, but by do-gooder groups that say, oh, how can you facilitate this? This is so unhealthy. So there should always be a way for you to buy that steak and not have your steak purchase subject to a veto by someone who thinks you should be eating soy instead. And I think that is to me the thing that is. It's something that I think the new corporate investors and the new institutional investors don't really like to talk about, and they don't like to emphasize it. They like to emphasize the sound money part. They like to emphasize the inflation hedge part, and that's fine. But I think that is really like the important thing from my perspective, and that it's not, again, law. Even for law-abiding citizens, this is important. They may not think it's important. Like the average person on the street, when they're they go into Walmart and they just want to buy some diapers. They want to buy some toilet paper. They want to buy, they're buying some orange juice. They're not thinking about censorship resistance. They're not thinking about intermediaries or centralization, because they don't have to until one day when it happens to you. And then it's the most important thing in the world. And, the question is, can a technology and a currency that is always there for you when you absolutely need it, can it break into the mainstream when it has this reputation as being, the go-to payment mechanism for those on the margins. And I don't know. I think that would be great, but we shall see. So I can't make a prediction but the one thing I will predict is that Bitcoin will definitely be here in 5 years. I don't know what the price will be. It should theoretically be higher than it is now, just if present trends continue, but I can't even say that with certainty, but I know it will never be zero. Or at least it will not be zero in our lifetimes, because there's always going to be a need for, in this world that we live in, where you have busybodies, you have, you have sensors. In a world like that, you're always going to need something like Bitcoin, so you can have payments without permission.
And it can keep people honest. You know what I mean? If in the way that, like, if we have Bitcoin as an option to trade, well, then banks need to make sure that, they allow people a certain amount of freedom. Just because I support this or I support that, I shouldn't be banned. And talking about specifically, Pornhub and the adult industry and so forth, obviously that's a topic that I know quite well. Pornhub specifically, and actually all adult platforms, were banned by PayPal. PayPal wasn't used for payments. Let's say you wanted to buy a premium membership or anything like that. It was banned to pay the actresses. So like the actual talent that was providing content was getting an affiliate commission, and PayPal decided, we don't want to support this anymore. Well, this is people's livelihood. This is how people were making money, and they were getting paid with PayPal. Well, what happened is that was all wiped out, and then alternative methods came on board. And one of the biggest was crypto. So the actual biggest use case for crypto in the adult space is really the transaction between the, I guess the tube site or the website or the business and its actresses or actors or talent. So, I mean, and at the end of the day, who am I to say, you're not supposed to be doing this or whatever? This is, again, we're talking censorship. So this is a very interesting topic. And the important thing also to keep in mind when you were saying, do you want to buy the stake, or do you want to, how you want to pay cash, is I think Europe is ions in advance to North America in general, because privacy is seen. Privacy is so much more important, I think, in Europe, and they're enacting a lot more laws and making sure that people have privacy. Whereas I feel like in North America, people are not really in tune to what's going on with their privacy. But I think it's crypto and privacy and just being able to buy what you want to buy is all kind of going in tandem. They're all going to kind of move together and adjust to fulfill each other's purpose. So very interesting point. And I definitely agree with you that Bitcoin's here to stay. I think it's going to be, the best way to describe it, not to sound cliche, but digital gold. I mean, we need a digital asset. And there's going to be I think a slew of them that are going to come, not just monetary format, whether it's art or whatever, different digital assets. So the best is yet to come, or it's exciting. And I think it's scary for a lot of people, because obviously the unknown is always fearful. So thank you so much, Marc, for all your thoughts. I think this was a super informative episode, and apologies to our audience for a couple of the glitches that we had on the audio, but I'm happy that you listened through this, and hopefully we can have you back, Marc, for a follow-up as Bitcoin progresses and you get more information on DeFi and stablecoins and all this interesting stuff that we spoke about. So thanks again for joining in, and have yourself a great day.
I'd be delighted. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Bye. Hope you found today's session valuable. If you have any questions for me or just want to connect, please feel free to visit my website, mariasparagis.com. That's mariasparagis.com. I'd love to hear what you're working on, so drop me a line on any hot button issues your business is experiencing. And remember, don't worry about failure. You only have to be right once.